I wanted to say hi, briefly introduce myself. As a teenager, I taught myself how to code. Then I studied information design. From there, got into entrepreneurship, had an internet startup for a while, and randomly stumbled from this into politics. I ran election campaigns in Austria, national election campaigns twice, with the local Pirate Party once, and once with a leftist alliance. And now I'm the communications advisor and assistant of Reda, who is the German pirate in the European Parliament, the only pirate in the European Parliament. She sits with the Greens EFA group. So I have a technical background, I would say, and I look at these issues through that lens, I think. Someone earlier wanted to talk about the philosophy of participation. I want to focus a little more on the urgency of it and on the need of it, because I feel that hasn't been mentioned enough today. I had so many conversations with friends and with random people on Twitter about Brexit, and whether that means that we should all be scared of participation, because look what happens if you let people decide. And my view is that it shows us what happens if you do participation in a bad way. And if all people can do is make one mark on a piece of paper every couple of years, and then suddenly there's this once-in-a-century big way of participating and deciding and actually, having an impact, and there's a rising sense of disenfranchisement among many people, then it is understandable to me that they will use this to kick the elites in the ass in whatever destructive way they can. So I think it shows us that what we need is continuous and responsible everyday engagement, and not one referendum per decade, because that's just bound to be overloaded with campaigning from different sides, different political interests, and people's frustrations being taken out in that referendum. So what I think is also, true is that our democracy is woefully inadequate for a 21st century world, and as everything else around us develops, democracy is not keeping up at all. The ways we have to express ourselves are growing every day, but to influence politics, they are not. The EU, of course, has extra challenges of this perceived distance to people, and the reputation of being business-driven or technocratic. Right now, in our office, we're working around copyright reform, and unfortunately, that's one great example of these interpretations being true, because the digital commissioner for the digital society and economy has decided to, for example, ignore 500,000 people who last summer signed a petition asking for a change to copyright reform around freedom of panorama. And instead, copyright reform, as it is proposed by the Commission, is mostly like gifts for industries, for big European industries that threaten the internet. But I'll not bore you about this today. So from our point of view, the first step towards participation in our office is transparency, being transparent about our work and providing data that people can build upon. From there on, we want to make sure people understand the work we're doing, they can follow it, they can stay informed, and we want to engage them by making what is important also interesting, because often important things aren't interesting by themselves. It also needs, as was often said today, the commitment and the seriousness that if you do participate, then what you do will have an impact and not just be ignored. And on top of that are the tools and processes that you use. And I think what I found in my different experiences is that these things, especially like the commitment and the seriousness and the tools, are doable inside adventurous organizations who are willing to give up power and empower the individual members, such as the Pirate Party. But I found it very hard to try to implement actual, real participation inside a parliamentary process. the challenges are obvious. There's, you're working with legal text ultimately. Nobody likes reading legal text who isn't paid for it. The processes are complex, and even like the timeline is hard to estimate on where these files will go and what will happen exactly. And of course, the actual work happens in like backroom compromise deals. So how can you let people participate there? That's extremely tricky. So if you would listen to your voters, then you couldn't be effective inside the parliamentary process because you'd be restrained by whatever the participatory process tells you to do, and you wouldn't be flexible to make compromises or deals. And that's how politics works. So I still want to show you the different things we tried so far in the, what has it been, 2.5 years? First of all, like I said, transparency and data. So Julia has been the rapporteur, the person responsible for the entire parliament on one initiative report, the copyright evaluation report. And so I'm going to show you pictures of websites because that's how technologically advanced we are. So we tried visualizing for our voters and other interested people where in this process this report is, and we tried breaking it down to make it understandable, the timetable, the opinions of the other political groups, the committees, and so on, what other organizations said about our work, what experts said about it, and so on. And then also the lobby meetings that went into writing this report. To me, this seems like the bare minimum that anyone writing a report should do, but strangely, no one does that. Like, this kind of stuff is never actually visualized for people, for normal people. Then we produced this like explanatory document. So there was a 28-point or something, I don't know, 15-page report, and we tried for each point visualizing it, giving examples, citing sources, and so on, to really make this understandable, which, by the way, also ended up helping inside the parliament, because of course MEPs are also, at the end of the day, normal people, and not all experts on copyright reform. And then here, it's just a section of the site. For the final version of her report, much amended, we produced this page indicating which of the paragraphs that ended up being in there she approved of, and which one she voted against, but was, of course, the majority was otherwise, and who voted for it, which is normally not recorded information on amendments in committees, and then commentary highlighting things. So yeah, trying to visualize the work that's happening in the parliament. Then, so we started keeping a list of lobby meetings for our report, and then we decided to automate that process to make it easier. Came up with a software implementation where MEPs can very easily, from their Outlook calendar, indicate a meeting that they have as a lobby meeting, and then it automatically gets published to a website. They can link it with the transparency register, and this has now been adopted by many MEPs in the Greens group and also by Transparency International. So it's now a non-partisan project, and we're hoping that other groups are going to pick it up because that is also one of the data points that you need to know how to participate, what to participate on, who else is participating in which process. We're still waiting for some other group to pick it up real soon now. So engagement, we tried making what's happening in the parliament interesting. When there were the commissioner hearings in the parliament, we advertised them with these fake movie posters, which were proved fairly popular on Twitter. So here we have Mr. Oettinger, or Mr. Hill's hearing, or this is Mr. Ansip. Yeah, just a fun little thing. But that's also necessary. I mean, you have to, make memes out of your work, otherwise they're not going to become popular. Then also for this commissioner hearing, that was our first real participatory project. We collected, so Julia had the opportunity to ask them each a question, and we used this off-the-shelf tool called User Voice to collect input, what she should be asking these people. trying to get the internet community involved in these hearings. Yeah, I mean, participation was not amazing. We're new in the parliament. We didn't have a huge audience of our own, but it did have a big effect in the end because Julia got, let's see if this works. Julia got Ansip to take up this project and do his first Twitter chat inspired by this. I'm not sure that Twitter Q&A is really the best participatory process, but like even this website, although yes, it is a separate platform where people are not already on, by allowing people to vote up and down ideas, had a little more representational aspects than just like ask whatever question you want, and Ansip's team picks and chooses whatever they want to respond to, and not necessarily something that's popular that many people are asking. I'll skip this one. Another project we did is, so we have these consultations by the Commission. Sometimes they are super complicated, and recently we've seen people build forms in front of these consultations to try to make the questions easier, or to provide commentary along with the questions to make people understand what these questions mean. The very first one we did, that was before Julia was elected to Parliament, there was a general copyright consultation, and like in 2 nights with some friends, we built this project that took an 80-page consultation document, which you couldn't fill out online even. You had to download and then write your answers and then send it by email. And we broke it down into a simple multiple-step form where we asked you to indicate which common problems with copyright you had, and then only showed you the questions that related to these and explained them to you. And then at the end, gave you the finished document to email to the Commission as your response. So making it really simple to participate in these consultations. That led to about 6,000 responses to something that normally gets a couple hundred. Then we used the Scuto when Julia's draft report was out to get people's comments on the actual proposals that she was writing here. Participation was, so I think you told me earlier even that we saw a lot of visits, but not a lot of actual input, because of course we're talking about, I mean, initiative reports, not legal text, but close to legal text, a complicated issue. It was great for us though, because several of these suggestions, of these 140 comments we got here, we actually implemented into amendments afterwards. I think they were then rejected by the majority, but yeah, that's how it goes. So these projects have been getting progressively more in-depth and more detailed and more time-intensive. I just wanted to show briefly, this is like this to its extending this to its conclusion. This is a project by the Berlin Pirate Party about an inquiry committee where they decided we'll just put everything online. We'll put every document online and every person, and we'll tag everything, and we'll make it entirely transparent. And then people will flock to this website and do our work. Like they will look through these documents and identify things. And of course that doesn't happen. Like again, nobody's not being paid for this, puts in the work necessary. So I think that goes too far. It's not about putting all the, like your inbox, making it publicly accessible and then thinking this will lead to participation, obviously. And we had a process where we tried to come up with, okay, inside this parliamentary process, what can we most open up to participation? And the instruments we came up with were, on the one hand, the questions to the Commission that a member of the Parliament can ask every week, because you can ask freely about whatever topic, and the Commission is forced to answer. And we came up with this very complex idea of supporting multiple languages, supporting people inputting just very simple ideas, and then the community coming and transforming that into a question in Commission speak to actually ask, and to choose every week the top voted question by the community and submit this to the Commission. We ended up not implementing it because we saw that these answers by the Commission are often very late, 6 to 8 weeks or whatever, or maybe even later, and often they don't really give much of an answer. So we had our fear was that people would be frustrated by the outcome of this. We didn't really have the buy-in and the commitment. The other idea we had was proposals for the budget for pilot projects. This is something MEPs can do once a year, doing a voting process around that, but then again, it's only once a year, so we also didn't do that yet. I will skip this as well. Well, we ended up doing more participatory projects with just a small crowd of people, not in public, giving them specific action ideas to replicate, to support our work. But I'll keep this vague. And then we did, of course, just campaigning around the vote on Julia's report. This was a site that allowed people to indicate which issues in copyright reform they cared about, and then it gave them specific instructions. That was an interesting experiment. Like, call your MEP, but not call your MEP with a message like, stop TTIP, but with an actual complicated, nuanced message, like, vote for Amendment 412 and 322 and point 16 from the IMCO opinion. I'm not sure. I mean, I know several hundred phone calls were made. I don't really know if MEPs responded to these specific instructions in a useful way. Yeah, but I mean, that's the kind of input they need, right? They don't need, I don't know, copyright needs to be cooler. They need specific lobbying. That's what the lobbyists do. Like, these are the amendments that we need, and these are the ones you need to reject. So we tried putting this into citizens' hands. Mixed success. Okay. Yeah, so I strongly believe that in the end, you know, it's not enough for one MEP out of 700 something to try now and then a few participatory processes. We really need to get people into a habit of participation. We need to get from specific actions that are like petitions that are driven by, I don't know, outrage, stop this bad thing, or that can be just end up being mobilization exercises. Who gets most people to the consultation form and answer in their interest, or that only engage a small elite, or that are then ignored at the end, to a continuous process. The only thing I've seen that I think has a great potential to be such a continuous process is liquid democracy. I don't know how many, can I have a show of hands? How many people have encountered liquid democracy? So I would say the general idea is something that combines elements from representative and direct democracy to allow people to decide at any point in time how deep they want to engage in specific topics, and if they want their voice to be represented by somebody else, or if they want to participate directly. This is something we used inside the Austrian Pirates to write our election platform, and it worked very well there. So the idea is, as opposed to direct democracy, where only the people who have the time to engage in every single topic are heard, here you can, for the things that you don't care about, that you don't have time for, you can trust somebody else, but it doesn't have to be like a political party. It can be just your neighbor or somebody you know who you think knows more about this topic, and they in turn can trust somebody else, and the weight of your vote ends up hopefully at people who have the time and competence to vote on things, and then there's not just a yes/no vote, but a ranked choice vote, and so on. Super complicated and far from usable right now for most people. But I think this is something we should put a lot more effort into to try and simplify these systems and try to, because I really think we need this continuous thing. It needs to be, okay, you check Facebook and then you need to check your participation thing and see what's happening there if you have time, or like trust somebody else to participate for you. It can't be just these individual actions, in my opinion. So yeah, I think we are still in a very experimental phase on anything that actually works. It requires massive investment. It requires iterative development. I don't think there's any off-the-shelf software that can successfully be used in most of the cases. And I don't understand why the Commission or the Parliament or whoever doesn't rent a big warehouse somewhere in Brussels and invest a couple million to invite 100 coders and designers and community managers and so on to come and experiment in making the work that they already do more accessible to citizens. Thank you.
Thank you.